The first time I noticed Spencer at the laundromat, he was sitting in the exact same cracked blue chair I always used. I remember standing there with my laundry basket, digging into my hip, staring at him like an idiot while the dryers rattled behind us. It was Sunday night, raining outside, and the whole place smelled like detergent and wet concrete. And this guy, this tall, tattooed, intimidating-looking guy, was casually taking my seat. Not that it was actually my seat, but after 8 months of living in that apartment building with the broken washing machines, I'd unofficially claimed it. Far corner, next to the vending machine, close enough to the dryers to hear when they stopped. I was tired, soaked from the rain, and honestly, ready to have a bad attitude about it. Then Spencer looked up. "Shit," he said immediately, standing halfway. "You always sit here, right?" His voice surprised me. Deep, yeah, but softer than I expected. I blinked. What?" He pointed at the chair. "I've seen you every Sunday for like 2 months. You always sit here with that book." I looked down at the paperback in my hand, then back at him. "You noticed that?" His mouth twitched like he was trying not to smile. Hard not to. That should have been the end of it. Small, awkward interaction. Nothing important. Instead, he grabbed his basket off the chair and slid it aside. "Seat's yours." I laughed a little. "You don't have to move." "Nah," he shrugged. "Feels wrong now." That was the first real conversation Spencer and I ever had. And honestly, I couldn't stop thinking about him after that. Because Spencer looked like the kind of guy you cross the street to avoid at night. Tall, broad shoulders, black tattoos crawling up both arms and disappearing under his sleeves, thick silver rings on his fingers, buzzed dark hair, a scar through one eyebrow. But then he'd open his mouth and ask things like, "What are you reading?" Or, "You want the less broken dryer? Number 6 works better." Or, "You looked cold walking in. You okay?" It completely threw me off. That first night, we ended up talking for almost an hour while our clothes dried. Well, mostly he talked. I learned he worked at a motorcycle repair shop 3 blocks away. Learned he came to the laundromat every Sunday after closing up the garage. Learned he drank those awful canned vanilla coffees because real coffee tastes like burnt dirt. I also learned he smiled with his whole face, which was dangerous, because once I noticed that smile, I started looking for it every week. My name's Philip, by the way, 26, graphic designer, chronically bad at talking to attractive men, especially men like Spencer. He wasn't just hot, he had that calm confidence that made you hyper-aware around him, like he knew exactly how much space he took up in a room without ever trying to dominate it. Meanwhile, I could barely maintain eye contact for longer than 5 seconds. But Sundays became this weird thing for us. Every Sunday around 7:30, I'd walk into the laundromat carrying my stupid IKEA laundry bag. And Spencer would already be there. Always. Sometimes sitting in my chair. But after that first week, he'd immediately stand up when he saw me. "Saved your spot." The second Sunday, I laughed. By the fourth Sunday, I expected it. By the sixth, I started looking forward to it way too much. It became routine. He'd save me the chair. I'd bring snacks from the bakery down the street. We'd complain about our week while old dryers shook the floor around us. And somewhere in the middle of all that, Spencer stopped feeling intimidating. He started feeling safe, which scared me even more. because I had a habit of reading too much into things. A guy remembers your seat at the laundromat? That doesn't mean anything. A guy starts buying your favorite vending machine chips before you arrive? Still, maybe nothing. A guy notices when you cut your hair, or switch cologne, or seem stressed before you even speak. Okay, maybe that starts meaning something. But I still told myself not to be stupid. Spencer had never actually flirted with me, not directly. There were moments, though, little moments that stuck in my head at night. Like the time I came in frustrated after getting yelled at by a client all day. I barely said 2 words before Spencer looked over from folding his shirts. You want to talk about it? And I don't know why that hit me so hard. Maybe because nobody usually noticed things like that about me. Or the week I showed up late because I'd gotten caught in a storm. My hoodie was soaked through, hair dripping water onto the tile. Spencer looked up from his chair and immediately frowned. Seriously, Philip. Before I could answer, he stood up, peeled off his own dark gray hoodie, and handed it to me. What? No. Put it on. You'll freeze. I'm covered in tattoos. I'm basically insulated. I laughed so hard I snorted, and Spencer looked absurdly pleased with himself afterward. That hoodie smelled like cedar wood and laundry detergent. I thought about it for days, maybe weeks. The thing was, I couldn't figure Spencer out. Some Sundays, he'd sit close enough that our knees bumped while we talked. Other Sundays, he'd seem quieter, almost nervous. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at me when he thought I wasn't looking. And every single time our eyes met, he'd immediately glance away, like he was the shy one, which made absolutely no sense, considering he looked like he fought bears recreationally. Then one night, something happened that completely shifted things between us. It was late October, cold enough that everyone walking into the laundromat had red noses and damp jackets. I got there around 7:30 like usual, but Spencer wasn't inside. At first, I figured he was running late. I loaded my washer, sat in the chair, checked my phone way too many times. Still no Spencer. And for some reason, that disappointed me more than it should have. I was halfway through a chapter of my book when the laundromat door finally opened. But Spencer didn't walk in alone. He came in carrying a little girl asleep against his shoulder, maybe 6 years old, curly dark hair, tiny pink rain boots dangling against his leg. And Spencer looked exhausted. The second he spotted me, his entire face softened. "There's my seat owner," he said quietly. I tried very normal not to stare at the child currently cuddled into his neck. "You have a kid?" He blinked once like he forgot she existed for a second. "Oh, no, my niece." I don't know why that relieved me instantly. "She okay?" "Yeah." He adjusted her carefully in his arms. "My sister got called into work last minute, and daycare closed early." The little girl stirred sleepily against him. Then she lifted her head, saw me sitting there, and squinted. "Who's that?" Spencer looked at me for a second before answering, and something about the tiny pause made my stomach flip. "That's Philip," he said softly. The little girl stared at me another few seconds. Then she smiled. "Oh, the laundromat guy." And Spencer immediately looked horrified. I burst out laughing. "You talk about me?" His ears actually turned red, which somehow was the hottest thing I'd ever seen in my life. "Shut up," he muttered. And that was the moment I realized this thing between us, it definitely wasn't one-sided. After the whole laundromat guy thing, Spencer couldn't look me in the eye for almost 10 minutes, which was honestly incredible to witness. This massive, tattooed man, who looked like he belonged leaning against a motorcycle in some cologne ad, was suddenly fumbling with dryer sheets because his niece accidentally exposed him. Meanwhile, I was trying not to smile too hard. The little girl, apparently named Ava, had fully woken up by then and decided she liked me immediately, mostly because I gave her the chocolate chip muffin I'd bought for myself. "She's gonna expect snacks every week now," Spencer warned. Ava nodded seriously from her chair. "Yes." I laughed. "Fair enough." Spencer shook his head like he was exhausted already, but there was this softness in his expression when he looked at her. A completely different version of him than the one I'd first met. It did dangerous things to me. Watching Spencer carefully untangle Ava's curls while waiting for the dryers. Watching him carry her on one arm while loading detergent with the other. Watching him instinctively pull her closer whenever strangers walked in. Yeah, I was done for. At one point, Ava climbed into Spencer's lap while he folded tiny little sweaters, and she looked between us with suspiciously narrowed eyes. "Are you Daddy's friend?" The entire laundromat went silent in my brain. Spencer nearly dropped a sock. "I am not your dad," he said immediately. "You act like one." "That's because your actual mom lets you eat crayons." Ava gasped. That was one time. I was laughing so hard I had to lean forward in my chair. Spencer pointed accusingly at me. "Don't encourage her. You're doing great on your own." He rolled his eyes, but he was smiling again. That smile stayed in my head all week. After that night, things between us shifted. Not dramatically, just closer. Like something unspoken had finally surfaced between us. Spencer started texting me outside Sundays. It began innocently enough. He somehow found my Instagram after I mentioned a design project I was working on. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, I got a message. "Spencer, this logo client of yours is blind if they rejected that first version." I stared at my phone for a full minute before smiling like an idiot. After that, the texts became regular. Random photos from his garage, pictures of dogs he met during the day, complaints about customers, questions about movies. And every single morning after that, he sent me the same message. "Morning, seat owner." It became my favorite part of the day embarrassingly fast. I tried not to overthink it. But then Spencer started doing things that were very difficult not to overthink, like remembering tiny details about me. One Sunday I mentioned offhand that the heating in my apartment was terrible. The next week, he walked into the laundromat carrying a folded electric blanket. "You said your place gets cold." I stared at him. "Spencer, what? You can't just buy people heated blankets." "Why not?" "Because that's boyfriend behavior." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Instant silence. Spencer froze halfway through loading his washer. I froze too. Neither of us moved. Then slowly, very slowly, Spencer looked at me and said quietly, "Maybe I don't mind that." My stomach absolutely flipped over itself. I opened my mouth, closed it again, because suddenly I couldn't breathe correctly. Spencer looked nervous immediately after saying it, like he regretted it. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Sorry, that sounded..." "No," I interrupted too quickly. "No, it didn't." Another silence. Heavy this time. Different. And for the first time since meeting him, I realized Spencer wasn't just casually nice. He was trying. With me. The realization made my chest feel too tight. Because the truth was, I'd liked him for a while now. Long enough that Sundays had stopped being ordinary. Long enough that I caught myself thinking about him while grocery shopping, or walking home, or lying in bed at night. Long enough that seeing his name light up my phone made me stupidly happy. And now suddenly it felt possible that maybe he felt the same. That thought terrified me, because wanting Spencer felt dangerous in the way all meaningful things do. Like if I let myself hope too much, I'd ruin everything. So instead of saying anything smart, I grabbed the electric blanket and muttered, "Thank you." Spencer smiled softly. "Yeah." And somehow that tiny moment changed everything. 2 weeks later, Spencer asked me to dinner. Well, sort of. We were sitting in the laundromat after closing time because the owner knew Spencer and let us stay while finishing our dryers. I was half asleep in my chair, scrolling through my phone when Spencer suddenly said, "You busy Friday?" I looked up. "Depends. On how good the offer is." His mouth twitched. "There's a burger place near my shop." "Okay. They have garlic fries." Still listening. "And I was thinking maybe you could stop pretending this isn't basically a date." My brain completely short-circuited. Spencer looked calm saying it, but his fingers were gripping a towel way too tightly, which meant he was nervous too. That helped slightly. "You think this is basically a date?" I asked carefully. Spencer held my gaze. "I think I save you a seat every week because I like seeing you." My heart started pounding so hard it actually annoyed me. "And," he continued quietly, "I think you keep showing up because maybe you like seeing me too." God, there was no smooth response to that, especially because he was right, completely right. So instead I smiled helplessly and asked, "What time Friday?" The look on Spencer's face after that, I don't think I'll ever forget it. Like relief mixed with excitement mixed with disbelief. Like he genuinely wasn't sure I'd say yes. "7?" he asked. "7's good." And just like that, I had a date with the tattooed laundromat guy. The problem was that once we acknowledged whatever this thing was, the tension got worse. So much worse. Because suddenly every little touch meant something. Every glance lingered longer. Every smile felt loaded. Friday finally came, and I changed outfits 4 times before leaving my apartment. I hated myself for caring that much. But Spencer made me nervous in a very specific way. Not because he was intimidating anymore. Because he mattered. And that was somehow scarier. When I got to the burger place, Spencer was already outside waiting. Black jacket, dark jeans, arms crossed against the cold. And the second he saw me, his entire face lit up. That stupid, beautiful smile again. "You came," he said. I laughed nervously. "You invited me." "Yeah, still feels surprising." I tried very hard not to melt on the sidewalk. Then Spencer stepped closer. Not all the way. Just enough that I caught the familiar cedarwood smell from his hoodie again. "You look really good, Philip." And that absolutely ruined me. Because Spencer said it so honestly. Like he wasn't trying to flirt. Like he just needed me to know. I felt heat crawl up my neck instantly. "Thanks," I muttered. Spencer smiled slightly. "Cute when you blush." Oh my God. His laugh rumbled low in his chest, warm and easy. And before I knew it, he reached for the restaurant door, holding it open for me. "Come on, seat owner." I walked inside, smiling so hard my face hurt, and for the first time in a long time, something felt like it might actually become real. Dinner with Spencer was supposed to be casual. That's what I told myself anyway. Just burgers, just hanging out outside the laundromat for once. Totally normal. Except nothing about it felt normal. Not the way Spencer kept looking at me across the table like he was trying to memorize my face. Not the way his knee brushed mine under the booth and stayed there. And definitely not the way my chest tightened every time he smiled. The burger place was crowded and loud, but somehow it still felt weirdly intimate sitting there with him. Spencer had rolled his sleeves up halfway through dinner, exposing more tattoos along his forearms. Black ink twisted around muscles that flexed every time he picked up his drink. I tried not to stare. I failed repeatedly. "You're doing it again," Spencer said casually. I blinked. "Doing what?" "Looking at my tattoos like they personally offended you." I almost choked on a fry. "They're just distracting." One of his eyebrows lifted. "Distracting good or distracting bad?" I grabbed my water immediately to buy time. Spencer laughed softly under his breath. "You get flustered really easy, Philip. You make it impossible not to." The words slipped out before I could filter them. Spencer went very still. Then slowly, he leaned back in the booth, eyes locked on mine. "Good," he said quietly. That one word sat heavy in my stomach. God, how was this man real? After dinner, neither of us seemed ready to go home, which became obvious when we spent 20 minutes standing outside the restaurant, pretending we were still deciding where to go next. Cold air curled around us while traffic passed nearby. Spencer shoved his hands into his jacket pockets. "You want to walk a little?" I nodded immediately. So we did. No destination, just wandering through quiet streets while talking about stupid things. Favorite movies, worst jobs, childhood stories. At some point, Spencer admitted he used to be obsessed with dinosaurs as a kid. I laughed so hard I had to stop walking. "You?" I managed between breaths. "You look like a dinosaur kid?" I was a dinosaur kid. "You absolutely collected plastic raptors." His expression turned defensive. "They were velociraptors." "Oh my God, that's worse." Spencer grinned. "You're making fun of me now, huh?" "Yes." Rude. Adorable, though. The second I said it, silence dropped between us. Not awkward, just charged. Spencer stared at me under the glow of a street lamp, and suddenly I became hyper-aware of how close we were standing. His face softened. "You think I'm adorable?" I swallowed hard. "Sometimes." Spencer stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but enough that my pulse immediately sped up. "Philip." The way he said my name, low and careful, like it mattered. I looked up at him, and for one terrifying second, I thought he was going to kiss me right there on the sidewalk. I wanted him to, badly. But then a car horn sounded somewhere nearby, breaking the moment. Spencer exhaled sharply and looked away first. "Sorry," he muttered. "For what?" His jaw flexed slightly. "I'm trying not to rush this." That hit me harder than the almost kiss, because suddenly I realized Spencer wasn't casually flirting. He was being careful with me, intentional, like whatever this was mattered to him too. I don't know what possessed me then, but I reached out and lightly caught the sleeve of his jacket. Spencer looked back at me immediately. "You don't have to apologize," I said quietly. His expression changed at that, softened completely. And then, before I could panic about it, Spencer gently took my hand. Not dramatic, not forceful, just warm fingers sliding carefully against mine like he was checking whether it was okay. I think my entire brain stopped functioning. He glanced down at our hands once, then back at me. "Still okay?" I nodded instantly. "Yeah." Spencer smiled. Small, real. And just like that, we kept walking through the cold city streets holding hands like we'd been doing it forever. After that night, things moved naturally, slowly, but naturally. Spencer started picking me up from work sometimes. I started bringing him coffee at the garage. We texted constantly, and Sundays at the laundromat became unbearable in the best way because now there was actual tension between us. Real tension. Like the kind where every accidental touch made both of us go quiet for a second. One Sunday I was leaning over to grab clothes from the dryer when Spencer reached past me at the same time. His chest pressed briefly against my back. Just for a second, but I swear the entire room tilted. Neither of us moved immediately. I could feel his breath near my ear. Then Spencer stepped back too fast, muttering, "Sorry." Meanwhile, I almost dropped half my laundry on the floor. Pathetic. Completely pathetic. And Spencer wasn't much better. The more comfortable we got emotionally, the more nervous he became physically. Like he wanted to touch me constantly, but was scared of doing too much. It was weirdly sweet, also incredibly frustrating, because by that point, I thought about kissing him basically every hour of the day. Apparently, Spencer was struggling too. I found that out one night when he invited me to the garage after closing. "I need help," he'd texted dramatically. When I got there, I found Spencer sitting on a rolling mechanic stool, staring angrily at a broken vending machine in the corner. I blinked at him. "This is the emergency? It ate my $5. You're unbelievable." "It's theft, Philip." I laughed and walked closer. The garage smelled like motor oil and cold air, tools scattered across workbenches under fluorescent lights. Spencer watched me the entire time I approached. That look again, like he couldn't help it. "What?" I asked finally. He leaned back slightly against the stool. "Nothing. You're staring. Can you blame me?" My stomach flipped instantly. God, this man. I stepped closer before I could overthink it. Close enough now that Spencer's knees brushed mine where he sat. His eyes lifted slowly to my face. Neither of us spoke. The air between us suddenly felt too thick. And then Spencer quietly said, "You're killing me lately." Every nerve in my body lit up. "What does that mean?" His gaze dropped briefly to my mouth, then back to my eyes. "It means," he said carefully, "I'm trying very hard to be respectful." Oh, oh, I think my heart actually skipped. "Spencer, you don't have to say anything," he said immediately, almost nervous again. I kissed him. I didn't plan to, didn't think. I just grabbed the front of his jacket and kissed him before I lost my nerve." For one terrifying second, Spencer froze completely. Then he made this low sound in his throat, and suddenly his hands were on my waist, pulling me closer, carefully but firmly, like he'd wanted to do it for weeks, which apparently he had. The kiss itself wasn't rushed. That's what I remember most. It felt intentional. Spencer kissed like he did everything else. Steady, focused, careful. But there was so much restraint underneath it that I could barely breathe. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were visibly shaken. Spencer stared at me like I'd just done something unfair. Philip, he said hoarsely. I was still gripping his jacket. Yeah? You cannot kiss me like that in my workplace. I burst out laughing instantly. Spencer groaned, dropping his forehead briefly against my stomach. I'm serious. You kissed me back. Obviously, I kissed you back. His arms tightened slightly around my waist. Then, quieter. I've wanted to do that since, week 3 at the laundromat. I smiled helplessly. Week 3? You wore glasses that day. That's your reason? You looked cute. I don't know what you want from me. I laughed again, but my chest felt painfully full, because somehow this terrifying-looking tattooed mechanic had become the sweetest thing in my life, and I was already falling way too hard for him. After we kissed, Spencer got weird. Not bad weird, just visibly overwhelmed, which honestly made me feel a little better because I'd spent the entire walk home internally screaming. We kissed in his garage, like actual movie-level romantic tension. And now suddenly this thing between us was real. Very real. The next morning I woke up to 3 separate texts from him. Spencer, morning. 2 minutes later. Sorry if I came on too strong last night. Then another one immediately after. Actually, no, I'm not sorry at all. I laughed so hard into my pillow it was embarrassing. By the time I responded, he'd already sent another message. You awake? I typed back. Barely. 3 dots appeared instantly. Come get breakfast with me. No, good morning. No, pretending to play it cool. Just direct. Very Spencer. So an hour later, I found myself sitting across from him in a tiny diner near his garage while he nervously destroyed little paper sugar packets with his fingers. You know, I said finally, for someone covered in tattoos, you panic surprisingly easy. Spencer looked offended. I do not panic. You sent me 4 texts before 8 a.m. That's called communication. That's called spiraling. He pointed at me with his coffee cup. You kissed me first. That's true. And now I don't know what the rules are. I smiled despite myself. What rules? His ears actually turned pink again. God, I loved when that happened. I don't know, he muttered. Are we dating now? The fact that this giant, intimidating man asked that so carefully nearly killed me on the spot. I leaned forward slightly over the table. Do you want to be? Spencer looked at me for exactly half a second before answering. Obviously. My chest tightened so hard it almost hurt, because there wasn't hesitation in his voice. No uncertainty. Just honesty. I think that's what kept getting me with Spencer. He never played games. If he liked me, I knew it. If he wanted to see me, he said it. If he was nervous, it showed all over his face. There was something terrifyingly sincere about him. So I smiled and said quietly, Then yeah, I think we're dating. Spencer stared at me another second. Then he relaxed so visibly that I burst out laughing. You were genuinely stressed about this. You have no idea. Spencer, I really like you, Philip. That shut me up immediately, because he said it so simply, like truth, and suddenly the diner felt too warm. I looked down at my coffee cup, mostly because I didn't trust my face. I really like you too. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Spencer softly said, Cool. I laughed again. Cool? I'm trying not to scare you away by saying insane things. Like what? His eyes flicked up to mine, like the fact I haven't stopped thinking about you for months. Oh, Oh, that one got me. Badly. Dating Spencer felt weirdly natural almost immediately. Like we skipped the awkward early stages somehow because we'd already spent months learning each other at the laundromat. We already had routines, inside jokes, comfort. Now there was just kissing involved too. A lot of kissing, actually. Because once Spencer finally let himself touch me without overthinking it, he became ridiculously affectionate. Not even in a flashy way, just constant little things. A hand against my lower back, guiding me through crowds. His fingers brushing mine whenever we sat together. Pulling me closer absent-mindedly while talking. One night we were watching a movie at my apartment, and Spencer spent almost the entire film lazily tracing shapes against my palm, while I pretended I could still focus on the screen. I couldn't, not remotely. Especially because every once in a while he'd glance over at me with that soft look again, like he still couldn't fully believe this was happening. Truthfully, neither could I. The first time Spencer came over to my apartment officially as my boyfriend, he immediately frowned at my kitchen. "Your stove is a fire hazard." "That's dramatic." "Philip, it only sparks sometimes." "Why does it spark?" I was laughing too hard to defend myself properly while Spencer inspected my appliances like a disappointed husband. Then he opened my fridge and got even more upset. "You have no food." "I have yogurt." "You have expired yogurt." Details. Spencer stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed his keys. "Come on." "Where are we going?" "Grocery shopping before you accidentally die." I followed him out, still laughing. But honestly, that domestic little moment affected me more than it should have, because no one had really taken care of me like that before. Not casually, not consistently. Spencer just noticed things and fixed them quietly, like it was instinct. At the grocery store, he tossed things into the cart while muttering judgmental commentary under his breath. "Vegetables are important." "I know vegetables are important." "You bought instant noodles in bulk." "They were on sale." "You live like a recently divorced college student." "Wow, you do." I shoved his shoulder lightly. Spencer grinned immediately. Then, without thinking, he reached over and kissed my forehead right there in the cereal aisle. I froze. Spencer froze too, like he hadn't meant to do it publicly. Then slowly, he smiled against my skin, and something in my chest absolutely melted. But the thing about falling for someone good is that eventually it becomes terrifying. Because suddenly, you have something to lose. In around a month into dating Spencer, I realized I was getting dangerously attached. Not crush attached, not casual attached, real attached. The kind where his absence changed my mood. The kind where I instinctively reached for my phone to text him every time something happened. The kind where I already couldn't imagine Sundays without him. And I think Spencer felt it too, because he started looking at me differently sometimes. Like he'd catch himself getting too soft, too honest. One Sunday night after the laundromat, we were sitting in his truck outside my apartment. Cold windows fogged slightly from the heater running. I was rambling about work stress, while Spencer listened quietly beside me. Then I stopped mid-sentence. "What?" Spencer blinked. "What?" "You're staring again." His mouth twitched slightly. "Sorry." "No, you're not." "No," he admitted softly. "I'm not." The look in his eyes made my pulse stutter. I swallowed hard. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Spencer hesitated, which almost never happened. Then, finally, because this feels important. The air left my lungs. Neither of us moved. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windshield. Inside, Spencer looked at me like I was something fragile and wanted at the same time. And suddenly, I understood something terrifying. I wasn't just falling for him anymore. I already had. Completely. Spencer must have seen it happen on my face, because his expression softened instantly. "Hey," he said quietly. I looked at him. His thumb brushed gently against my hand between us. "You okay?" I nodded too quickly. "Yeah," but my voice betrayed me a little. Spencer's eyes searched mine carefully, then softly, "Come here." And before I could overthink it, he pulled me across the center console and into his lap. I laughed breathlessly. "Spencer," just for a second. His arms wrapped around me, warm and solid and safe. And the second he held me close, something inside me cracked open a little, because no one had ever held me like that before, like they planned on keeping me. Spencer pressed one slow kiss against my jaw, then quietly into my neck. "You make me feel calm, Philip." God, that almost ruined me right there. I buried my face against his shoulder, mostly so he wouldn't see how emotional I suddenly felt. But Spencer noticed anyway. He always noticed. His hand moved slowly up and down my back. "You know what's crazy?" he murmured. "What?" "You still think I'm the one saving your seat every week." I pulled back slightly to look at him. Spencer smiled softly. "But honestly, you saved mine too." And right then, sitting in that parked truck with rain outside and Spencer holding me like I mattered, I think I realized this wasn't becoming love anymore. It already was. I wish I could say things stayed easy after that. That Spencer and I just kept falling into each other naturally, without complications. But life doesn't really work like that. Especially not when you finally find someone who matters enough to scare you. A few days after the truck conversation, Spencer stopped replying to my texts for almost an entire afternoon, which normally wouldn't have been a huge deal, except Spencer always replied. Even if he was busy, I'd get something eventually. A thumbs up, a quick "working," a photo of some engine part with zero explanation, something. But that Thursday, nothing. By 6 o'clock, I was trying very hard not to spiral. By 7:30, I failed completely. I just convinced myself Spencer secretly regretted dating me when my phone finally rang. His name flashed across the screen. I answered immediately. "Hey, Philip." The second I heard his voice, my stomach dropped. He sounded exhausted. "What happened?" A long exhale crackled through the speaker. "My sister got into a car accident." Everything inside me tightened. "Oh my God, is she okay?" "She's okay," he said quickly. "Broken wrist, concussion probably. Ava's okay too." I sank onto my couch instantly. "Seriously, Spencer." "I know." His voice sounded rough in a way I'd never heard before, like he was barely holding himself together. "Where are you?" I asked. "Hospital." "Do you need me there?" Silence, then quieter. "Can you come?" I was already grabbing my jacket. I found Spencer sitting alone in a hallway outside the emergency rooms. And honestly, seeing him like that hit me harder than I expected. Usually Spencer carried himself with this calm steadiness, like nothing could really shake him. But now he looked wrecked. Elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly together, hair messy like he'd been running his fingers through it for hours. The second he saw me walking toward him, his entire face changed. Not relieved exactly, just softer, like he could finally breathe a little. I sat beside him immediately. "How are they?" "They're keeping my sister overnight." "And Ava?" "With my mom." He nodded tiredly against the wall behind him. For a minute, neither of us spoke. Then Spencer quietly said, "I was scared." That got me, because he admitted it so honestly. I reached over without thinking and took his hand. Spencer gripped mine instantly, hard, like he needed something solid. "I'm glad they're okay," I murmured. "Me too." Another silence. Then finally Spencer looked over at me. "You came fast." I shrugged slightly. "Of course I did." Something emotional flickered across his face so quickly it almost hurt to look at. He stared at our joined hands a second. Then softly, "No one really does that for me." My chest tightened painfully. I squeezed his hand once. "Well, I do." Spencer looked down immediately after that like he couldn't handle hearing it. And for the first time, I realized something important about him. Spencer took care of everyone. His sister, Ava, people at work, me. But I didn't think many people took care of Spencer. The realization settled heavily in my chest, because suddenly I understood why he held on to softness so carefully, like he wasn't used to receiving it back. I stayed with him at the hospital until almost 2 in the morning. At one point, Spencer fell asleep sitting upright beside me for maybe 20 minutes. I noticed because his head slowly tipped sideways onto my shoulder. And honestly, I think that might have been the exact moment I fully fell in love with him. Not during the kissing, not during the flirting, not even during the hand-holding walks home. It was that. Seeing this strong, careful man finally exhausted enough to let himself lean on someone. On me. When he woke up, he looked embarrassed immediately. "Sorry. You literally fell asleep for 20 minutes. I drooled, didn't I?" "A little." "Oh my God." I laughed quietly while Spencer covered his face with one hand. Then without thinking, I brushed my fingers lightly through the short hair near the back of his neck. Spencer froze instantly. Slowly he looked at me, and the expression on his face after that. Wow. Like no one had touched him gently in a very long time. "You okay?" I asked softly. He nodded once, but his eyes stayed locked on mine. Then quietly, "You do things to me, Philip." I smiled a little. "Good things?" "The worst possible things." That made me laugh again. But Spencer didn't laugh. Instead, he leaned forward and kissed me softly right there in the empty hospital hallway. Careful, slow, like he couldn't help himself. And somehow that tiny kiss felt more intimate than any of the heavier ones we'd shared before. Because it wasn't about tension, it was comfort. When he pulled back, his forehead rested briefly against mine. "Thank you for coming," he murmured. I touched his jaw lightly. "You never have to thank me for that." Spencer looked at me for another long second, then finally whispered, "There you go again." "What?" "Making it impossible not to love you." My heart genuinely stopped, like physically stopped. Spencer seemed to realize what he just said at the exact same moment I did. His eyes widened slightly. Neither of us moved. The hallway suddenly felt dead silent, and for the first time since meeting him, Spencer looked truly nervous. But before he could panic himself into taking it back, I grabbed his face and kissed him again. Harder this time. Immediate. Certain. because there was absolutely no world where I was letting him regret saying that. When we finally pulled apart, Spencer looked completely overwhelmed. "Philip, I love you too." That was it. That was all it took. Because the second those words left my mouth, Spencer kissed me again like he'd been holding himself back for months. His hands slid carefully against my waist, pulling me closer between his knees. And there, under ugly hospital lights at nearly 2 in the morning, Spencer kissed me like I was home. After that night, everything changed again. Not in some dramatic way, just deeper, softer, more certain. Spencer started calling me sweetheart when he was tired. I started leaving spare clothes at his apartment. Ava started referring to me exclusively as Uncle Philip, despite several failed attempts at correction. And every Sunday at the laundromat, Spencer still saved my seat. Every single time. No matter how crowded it got, no matter who was sitting there first. One night I walked in late after work and found Spencer standing beside the chair arguing with some old man. "I'm telling you, someone's sitting there. There's nobody there." "There will be." I was laughing before I even reached them. Spencer turned immediately at the sound, and the second he saw me, that look again, every single time. Like I was still his favorite person to see. "There he is," Spencer said softly. The old man looked between us dramatically. "You're saving seats in a laundromat for dates now?" Spencer didn't even hesitate. "Yeah." Then he walked over, kissed me quickly in front of everyone, and handed me a vanilla coffee. Exactly how I liked it. My chest felt so full it almost hurt. Because somehow, this ridiculous little laundromat had become the center of my entire life. And Spencer had become home. The first time I slept over at Spencer's apartment officially, he got embarrassed about his bedding, which was honestly the least intimidating thing I'd ever witnessed. "I should warn you," he said while unlocking his front door. "My sheets don't match." I stared at him. "That's your concern?" "They're different shades of gray." "Oh no. Arrest immediately." Spencer rolled his eyes, but he was smiling. His apartment looked exactly like I imagined it would. Clean, but lived in. Dark furniture. Plants somehow still alive despite him claiming he forgot to water them constantly. A stack of motorcycle magazines on the coffee table beside a ridiculously soft blanket. And everywhere I looked, there were little signs of him. Boots by the door, coffee mugs in the sink, a sweatshirt tossed over the couch. It felt strangely intimate, being surrounded by all the quiet pieces of his life. Spencer noticed me looking around and suddenly looked nervous again. "What?" "You're overthinking." "I am not." "You're doing the eyebrow thing." "The what?" "The worried eyebrow thing." He touched his forehead automatically. "I have a worried eyebrow thing?" "Yes." "That's devastating." I laughed while Spencer moved around the kitchen, pretending not to be flustered. Then he paused halfway through opening the fridge. "You hungry?" "Always." "Good. I make decent grilled cheese." "High standards tonight." "You're lucky I like you." I leaned against the counter watching him cook, and honestly, that might have been more intimate than making out. There's something weirdly dangerous about domesticity when you're in love with someone. Watching Spencer stand at the stove in sweatpants and a black t-shirt while quietly humming to himself should not have affected me as much as it did. But it did. Badly. especially when he turned around holding 2 plates and caught me staring. What? I smiled helplessly. Nothing. His eyes narrowed slightly. You're doing that look again. What look? The one where you look at me like you're emotionally compromised. I burst out laughing. You're unbelievable. And yet, Spencer said smugly, setting down plates, you're obsessed with me. Unfortunately, he was correct. Later that night, we ended up tangled together on his couch, watching some terrible action movie neither of us cared about. Well, I tried to watch it. Spencer kept distracting me. Not intentionally, I don't think. But every time he absent-mindedly rubbed circles against my hip, or kissed the side of my head, or tightened his arm around me, my brain completely stopped functioning. At some point, I noticed Spencer had gone quiet. I looked up from where I was half curled against him. You okay? He nodded once, eyes still on the TV. Yeah. But his fingers had slowed against my waist. I studied him for a second. Then quietly, what's going on in your head? Spencer exhaled slowly through his nose. A lot. I waited. Eventually, he glanced down at me. This feels serious. The vulnerability in his voice immediately got my attention. I sat up a little straighter against him. That scares you? No. He looked genuinely surprised by the question. Then softer. It scares me how little it scares me. That hit directly in the chest, because I understood exactly what he meant. Falling for someone should have felt risky, but with Spencer, it mostly felt inevitable, like my life had quietly rearranged itself around him before I even noticed. He looked down at his hand resting against my waist. I'm used to things ending, he admitted quietly. People leaving, things getting complicated. I frowned slightly. Who left? Spencer hesitated. Then finally, my dad. The room felt quieter instantly. He bailed when I was 13, Spencer said, voice even but distant. Mom worked constantly after that. I kind of just learned to handle things myself. Something inside me ached hearing that, because suddenly, so much about Spencer made sense. Why he took care of everyone automatically. Why he struggled asking for help. Why he looked surprised every time someone showed up for him emotionally. I reached for his hand immediately. Spencer. He shrugged lightly like it wasn't a big deal, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine anymore. It's whatever. No, I said softly. It's not. For a second, he just looked exhausted. Then quietly, I think part of me keeps waiting for this to disappear too. That one hurt. I shifted closer instantly, sliding my hand against his jaw until he finally looked at me. Hey. His eyes lifted slowly. I'm here. Spencer swallowed hard. I know. No, I murmured, brushing my thumb lightly against his cheek. I mean it. I'm not halfway in this. The expression on his face after that nearly wrecked me, because he looked like he wanted to believe me, like he already did a little, but wasn't fully used to the idea yet. Then Spencer leaned forward and kissed me softly. Not rushed, not heated, just emotional. His hand slid against the back of my neck carefully, holding me close. And when he pulled back, his forehead stayed resting against mine. You really are dangerous, he whispered. I smiled slightly. Why? Because you make me want things. What kind of things? His eyes searched mine quietly. A future. God. That word settled deep inside my chest. A future. Not temporary, not casual, real. And suddenly, I wanted it too. Way more than I was prepared for. That night was the first time we slept in the same bed together. Actually slept, which somehow felt more intimate than anything else. Spencer kept acting like he was trying to give me space, even though his king-size bed was enormous. "You can move closer," I mumbled eventually from my side of the mattress. In the dark beside me, Spencer laughed quietly. Was trying to be respectful. "You're basically hanging off the bed." "I'm a gentleman." "You're ridiculous." A pause. Then slowly, carefully, Spencer shifted closer. Warmth immediately spread along my side where his body brushed mine. Neither of us spoke for a second. Then Spencer's arm slid carefully around my waist, like he was checking if it was okay. I turned toward him automatically, and in the faint light coming through the curtains, I could just barely make out his face. Soft, sleepy, looking at me like I was something precious. "You good?" he whispered. I nodded once, then quietly admitted, "Better than good." Spencer smiled at that, small and tired and real. And sometime during the night, I woke up briefly to find him half asleep with his face buried against my neck, arms wrapped tightly around me like instinct. Like even unconscious, he wanted me close. I didn't sleep much after that, not because I was uncomfortable, because my chest physically hurt from how much I loved him. The next Sunday at the laundromat, things felt different again. Not because anything was wrong, because now everyone else noticed too. The old woman who always read magazines near the dryers smiled at us knowingly when Spencer immediately stood to give me my seat. "You boys are awfully cute," she said casually. I nearly inhaled dryer lint. Spencer just grinned. "Thanks, Linda. You finally asked him out, huh?" I looked between them. "You knew?" Linda snorted loudly. "Honey, this man looked like a kicked puppy every week before you walked in." Spencer groaned instantly. Oh my God. I was laughing too hard to breathe properly while Linda continued folding towels like she hadn't just destroyed him emotionally. "You should have seen him fixing his hair in the dryer reflection." "Linda, and the seat saving?" she continued. "Please, we all knew." I looked over at Spencer, who now looked genuinely ready to die. "You fixed your hair before I came in?" He covered his face with one tattooed hand. "Philip, you had a crush on me. I hate both of you." I was still laughing when Spencer finally grabbed my wrist and pulled me closer between his knees. Then quietly into my ear so only I could hear, "You're lucky I'm in love with you." The words hit me instantly, still, every single time. I smiled helplessly and kissed him softly right there beside the dryers. And somewhere behind us, Linda yelled, "About time!" By December, Spencer basically lived in my apartment half the week. Not officially, but his boots stayed by my front door now. His hoodie permanently occupied one corner of my couch, and somehow my fridge had transformed from expired yogurt graveyard into an actual adult refrigerator because Spencer kept quietly restocking it. "You know," I told him one night, "normal people don't sneak vegetables into their boyfriend's apartment." Spencer looked up from the kitchen. "You ate an entire bag of shredded cheese for dinner once." I was going through something. "You were watching reality TV." Emotionally, He laughed under his breath and tossed a grape at my forehead. I loved him so much it was becoming ridiculous. And apparently everyone else could tell too, especially Ava. One Sunday before Christmas, Spencer brought her to the laundromat again because his sister was working a double shift. The second Ava saw me, she sprinted across the room dramatically. "Uncle Philip!" I barely caught her before she launched herself directly into my chest. Spencer walked in behind her, carrying laundry baskets and looking deeply tired already. "She had 3 cookies in the car," he warned. "That explains the tackle." Ava gasped. "I did not tackle. You almost broke my ribs." "She definitely did," Spencer muttered. Then he leaned down and kissed me quickly, like it was the most natural thing in the world, which, honestly, it had become. Ava immediately narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "You guys kiss a lot now." Spencer sighed. "Yeah." "Why?" "Because I love him." Silence. My brain stopped, completely stopped. Spencer froze too, like he hadn't realized he said it out loud so casually. Meanwhile, Ava looked disgusted by the entire conversation. "Ew." But I couldn't even laugh, because Spencer was staring at me now, and there was no taking it back. Not that he wanted to. Slowly, Spencer's expression softened, then quieter just for me. "I do." God. Even after hearing it before, it still hit me like a truck. I smiled helplessly. "I know." Spencer looked visibly emotional for a second after that. Then Ava ruined the moment immediately by yelling, "Can I have vending machine chips?" And just like that, the spell broke. Spencer groaned dramatically while I laughed into his shoulder. A week later, something happened that scared the hell out of me. Spencer got hurt at work. Not badly, but enough. I was at my desk finishing client revisions when he texted me, "Don't freak out," which is objectively the worst possible way to begin a sentence. By the time I got to the garage, my heart was pounding. I burst through the side entrance and immediately found Spencer sitting on a workbench while one of his coworkers wrapped gauze around his forearm. Blood stained the towel in his lap. "Oh my God." Spencer looked up instantly. "Hi." "Hi." He blinked at me. "Spencer." "It looks worse than it is." His coworker snorted loudly. "That's because he's dramatic." "I'm dramatic?" I repeated incredulously. "You're pale," Spencer pointed out. "Because you're bleeding." The coworker finally finished wrapping his arm and walked away, muttering something about lovesick idiots. I ignored him completely and stepped closer to Spencer. "Let me see." "It's fine." "Spencer." He sighed and carefully uncovered part of the towel. The cut stretched along his forearm, angry and stitched. My stomach flipped immediately. What happened? Metal edge slipped while lifting an engine part. "You needed stitches." "Yeah." "You texted me, 'Don't freak out.'" "I was trying to help." I stared at him another second before gently touching his wrist, and suddenly all my panic turned into something softer, because Spencer looked exhausted again, not physically, emotionally, like he hated worrying me. "You scared me," I admitted quietly. His face changed immediately. "I know." The sincerity in his voice took all the anger out of me instantly. Spencer reached for my hand with his uninjured arm. "Come here." I stepped closer automatically, standing between his knees while he held onto my hand carefully. "I'm okay," he murmured. I nodded once, but apparently my face still betrayed me because Spencer touched my waist gently and looked up at me with that soft expression again. "Hey." "What?" "You care about me a lot, huh?" I laughed weakly. "Unfortunately." That finally made him smile. Then Spencer pulled me forward until my forehead rested against his. You know what's crazy? What? Nobody's ever panicked over me like this before. That broke my heart a little, because of course they hadn't. Of course Spencer had spent most of his life being the dependable one instead of the cared-for one. I cupped his face gently. Well, get used to it. Spencer looked at me for a long second, then very quietly, you really stayed. The vulnerability in those words nearly destroyed me. I kissed him softly before answering. Yeah, idiot, I did. And Spencer smiled against my mouth in that small, overwhelmed way he always did when he felt too much at once. A few nights later, Spencer invited me to his family's Christmas dinner, which absolutely terrified him for reasons I didn't fully understand at first. You've met my sister already, he said while driving. Mom's easy. Ava worships you. Then why do you look like you're going to war? Spencer tightened his grip slightly on the steering wheel. My family's complicated. I frowned a little. How? He hesitated. Then finally, my dad might be there. Oh, that explained everything. I reached over immediately, resting my hand against his thigh. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. Spencer covered my hand with his instantly. I want you there. That quiet certainty got me again. Always. So when we arrived at his mom's house 20 minutes later, I squeezed his hand once before he opened the truck door, and Spencer squeezed back hard, like courage. The house itself was warm and loud and smelled like cinnamon. Ava screamed when she saw me. His sister hugged me immediately. His mom cried after meeting me for approximately 30 seconds. Spencer never brings anyone home, she whispered dramatically while pulling me into the kitchen. Mom, Spencer warned from across the room. What? It's true. I looked over at him instinctively, and Spencer was already looking at me. That same look, like he still couldn't fully believe I was there. But halfway through dinner, the front door opened, and the entire room changed. Spencer went still beside me instantly. I looked up. A man stood in the doorway, older version of Spencer. Same eyes, same jawline, except colder somehow. The silence around the table became immediate and heavy. Then quietly, Spencer muttered, Of course he came. And I realized all at once, this night was about to become something much bigger than Christmas dinner. The man standing in the doorway looked exactly like an older, harder version of Spencer. Same dark hair, same broad shoulders, same intense eyes. But where Spencer felt warm once you knew him, this man felt sharp around the edges. The room had gone completely silent. Spencer's hand tightened around his fork beside me. Across the table, his sister looked exhausted already. Dad, she said flatly. The man gave a short nod, like he belonged there, despite the tension filling the entire house. I was invited. No one said you couldn't come, Spencer's mom replied carefully from the kitchen doorway. But nobody sounded happy about it. I glanced at Spencer instinctively. He looked furious. Not loud furious. Worse, controlled furious. The kind that sat heavy behind his eyes. His dad finally noticed me sitting beside him. Who's this? Before I could answer, Spencer spoke immediately. My boyfriend. No hesitation, no softening, just direct. I felt my chest tighten instantly. His father's eyebrows lifted slightly. Oh. The silence after that stretched awkwardly. Then Ava suddenly shouted from the living room floor. "His name's Philip, and he's nice." Honestly, thank God for Ava, because the tension cracked just enough for people to breathe again. Spencer's mom hurried everyone back toward dinner while his father took a seat at the far end of the table, as far from Spencer as possible, which, judging by Spencer's expression, was intentional on both sides. I leaned slightly closer to him under the table. "You okay?" Spencer nodded once, but I could feel how tense he was. His knee bounced slightly beneath the tablecloth. His jaw stayed locked tight. And suddenly I understood something important. Spencer wasn't scared of his father. He was bracing himself against old hurt. Dinner became this strange balancing act after that. Everyone trying to act normal while years of unresolved tension sat in the room with us. Spencer barely spoke. His father barely looked at him. And every time they accidentally made eye contact, something painful passed silently between them. At one point, Spencer's mom asked me about work, clearly trying to lighten the mood. I answered while Spencer quietly reached for my hand beneath the table. The second our fingers intertwined, I felt him relax slightly. Just slightly, but enough. His thumb brushed slowly against my knuckles while conversations continued around us, like grounding himself. Then finally, after nearly an hour of awkward small talk, Spencer's father spoke again. "So how long have you two been together?" I glanced at Spencer before answering. "About 4 months." His father nodded once. Then after a pause, "You seem serious." Spencer answered before I could. "We are." Again, that immediate certainty, no embarrassment, no hesitation. And weirdly, that seemed to affect his father more than anything else had all night. The older man studied Spencer carefully across the table. "You happy?" The question sounded almost suspicious, like he genuinely didn't know how to ask it. Spencer leaned back slightly in his chair, then calmly answered, "Yeah. Simple, honest, certain." I felt my throat tighten a little hearing it, because Spencer wasn't performing. He meant it completely. For a second, his father just stared at him. Then slowly his gaze shifted toward me. I honestly expected judgment, disapproval maybe. Instead, he looked tired, older than I realized at first glance. And quietly, almost awkwardly, he said, "Good." The entire table seemed surprised by that response, including Spencer. But before anyone could process it further, his father stood from the table. "I should go." His mom frowned immediately. "You just got here." "I know." But he was already grabbing his coat. Then, after a hesitation that visibly cost him something, he looked at Spencer. "I'm glad you're doing okay." Spencer went still beside me, because suddenly this wasn't about dinner anymore. This was about years. Years of silence. Years of resentment. Years of absence. His father swallowed once, then quietly, "I know I don't really get to ask for much from you." Nobody moved. "But I'd like to try again someday, if you'll let me." The room felt completely silent. Spencer stared at him for a long moment without speaking. And honestly, I had no idea what he'd say. This man had hurt him deeply. That much was obvious. But I could also see something else in Spencer's expression now. Not forgiveness exactly, just exhaustion from carrying the anger alone for so long. Finally, Spencer exhaled slowly through his nose, then said, "Maybe." One word, but it mattered. You could see it all over his father's face. He nodded once. Okay. Then quietly to me before leaving, take care of him. And before I could even answer, Spencer muttered dryly beside me, he already does. That got the smallest laugh out of his father before the front door closed behind him. Silence lingered afterward. Then Ava looked up from her coloring book and announced, well, that was weird. The entire table burst out laughing, even Spencer. And just like that, the tension finally broke. Later that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Spencer and I stood alone outside on his mom's back porch. Snow fell softly across the yard. Cold air curled around us, while yellow Christmas lights glowed through the windows behind us. Spencer leaned against the porch railing quietly. I stood beside him, close enough that our shoulders touched. You okay? I asked again softly. This time he took longer to answer. I don't know. Fair. We stayed quiet another minute. Then Spencer suddenly laughed under his breath. What? He shook his head slightly. If you told me 6 months ago that some guy from the laundromat would end up standing with me through family trauma, I smiled. Very romantic. You know what I mean. Yeah, I did. Because the truth was, neither of us expected this. Not really. One random seat at a laundromat somehow became this entire life together. And standing there beside him now, I realized something almost overwhelming. I couldn't imagine losing it anymore. Spencer looked over at me then. Snowflakes caught briefly in his dark hair. You stayed calm in there, he murmured. I was terrified. You hid it well. I smiled slightly. I just kept focusing on you. That soft look appeared in his eyes again immediately. The one that always got me. You always do that, he said quietly. What? Show up for me. I stepped closer without thinking. So do you. Spencer's hand slid gently against my waist beneath my coat. Then, after a pause, he admitted softly, I almost didn't come tonight. I frowned slightly. Why? His eyes searched mine. Because every important thing in my life before this eventually hurt. God, there it was again. That honesty. Raw and careful and real. I touched his face gently. But you came anyway. Yeah. Why? And Spencer smiled. Small, certain. Because you were with me. That did it. That completely did it. I kissed him immediately, cold hands against his jaw while snow fell around us. And Spencer kissed me back like he always did now, like he knew exactly how much I mattered to him. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. You know something? He murmured. What? I still would have saved you that seat every week, even if nothing happened between us. I laughed softly. That's actually insane. Probably. Then quieter. But I'm really glad something happened. Me too. God, me too. Because somehow the tattooed guy at the laundromat became the love of my life. Not through dramatic moments. Not through perfect timing. Just consistency. Kindness. Showing up every Sunday. Saving me a seat before I even realized I needed one. And honestly, I think I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful I walked into that laundromat on a rainy Sunday night because Spencer was there waiting for me like he always is.